Good morning, YouTube. As you can see, I'm in a different aircraft this morning. We're in the Cirrus Vision SF50. We're in Santa Maria. I'm going to fly to Monterey. Now, this is about 3 times the distance that I flew yesterday in the Cessna, so it would take 3 times as long, roughly speaking. So this is why I chose a jet this morning, so we could, just cut back on the time a little bit. Also, looking at the weather conditions for California this morning, it's stormy. As you can see outside the window, it looks a little hazy, but it's stormy weather conditions, and we'll do better. There's a helicopter. Stormy weather conditions, and we'll fare much better in this aircraft than we would in the Cessna. It is still a small general aviation aircraft, but it weighs more. It has de-icing capacity, and it goes faster. And it's nice to fly something different for a change. So this flight is about 120 miles, and at an altitude of 12,000 feet, it should take us about 44 minutes once we get into the air. We'll have a general bearing of about 314. Alright, let's get this aircraft started. I'm just waiting for the aircraft to actually get started up before I turn the generators on. Let me use the multifunction display for this one. Here we are. KMRY is Monterey Airport, Monterey Regional. And I don't know which runway we can land at yet, but I'm going to choose 28 for the time being. But we'll check with ATIS during flight, and we'll switch that to whatever runway is necessary to land at. But for the time being, that'll be the one. And where did I choose? Where did I set all this up yet? Yeah, Hixar. It sounded right, but I wasn't certain. Course reversal, we'll say no on that. And minimums, the minimums for this, for 28 is 1080. So if I do have to switch, I'll have to change minimums. I'll have to look up the information for whatever runway. I only looked up runway 28. What did I say? 1080. And one issue that I had with the Cirrus Vision SF50 initially when I purchased my flight yoke was that I would notice random engine shutoffs. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and activate this. Hixar 5100 feet. That does correspond with my notes. Alright, so as you can see, the engines did not start up yet. Actually, they did start up, but they went off. And this is because when I purchased my yoke, you know, with the Cessna, you have to use the mixture to make it lean or rich. But with the Jet, you don't have to do that. However, on my yoke, I must set my mixture to full rich or the engines won't stay on. As I was programming some of that stuff, if you've noticed me pause at all for any time while I was working with the multifunction display, it was because I was wondering, why am I not hearing the aircraft? It's because the engines failed to start. Releasing the brakes. Oh, one thing I need to do before we get in the air is I wanted to set the comm radio for 119.25 for ATIS. And an altitude of 12,000. Our bearing no. There we are. Why is it not moving? Oh, it just wants to stay on the GPS course. I'll leave it there. I think this aircraft only has 2 stages of flaps, extended and fully extended. So with that being said, I'm only going to use one for takeoff. Rotating.
TCAS alert.
Gear up. Flaps up. Alright. Autopilot engaged, nav, and I'll go ahead and turn on approach. We do have our radio set for ATIS. Let me check the vertical speed. And we'll turn off the landing lights. I don't know precisely how cold it is in California, whether or not it could freeze, but I went ahead and turned on the de-icing anyways, just in case, since it is raining. I'm using the Generation 1 Cirrus Vision SF50. I do have the Generation 2. I did modify the fuel for the Generation 1. Actually, I didn't even look at the fuel this morning, and I probably should have, but I think we'll have enough for this hop. So the fuel burn for this is more along the lines of what the real Generation 1 Cirrus Vision SF50 is capable of, whereas the default X-Plane version was not realistic. Once we level off at 12,000 feet, I will lower the throttle or set N1 to about 75–80%. N1 being here, this is what I'll use to monitor where I have it. There is no auto throttle on the Generation 1. Auto throttle is available on the Gen 2, which is part of the reason I downloaded that one. Alright, I'm going to set it at 80% and we'll see what the speed looks like at that point. I'd like to maintain a speed of about 200 knots. And as you can see, we are at 12,000 feet, but right here I have a magenta 5100. This only means that once I get to Hixar, I need to be at 5,100 feet. So once we're closer, let's see, here's our estimated time en route, and right now the numbers are quickly dropping because we're increasing in speed and we're getting closer, and that will eventually slow down into real time and be just natural seconds. Our ground speed right now is almost 200 knots. And our distance was 105 nautical miles. So once we're within, once we're closer, I'll start dropping to 5,100 feet. I'll try to make it so that by the time I'm within range of Hixar, I'm right there at it. Maybe 10 miles out, 15 miles out, I'll drop to 5,100 feet. We have a 17-mile-an-hour headwind, so that's going to slow us down a little bit. But with the weather being the way that it is, at least we're above the clouds. There is no rain right now. I could probably turn the anti-icing off, and in fact I think I will. But we can enjoy the sunshine up here. And if we were in the Cessna down below, we wouldn't be able to see anything for this flight except for clouds. And of course all we see up here as well is clouds, but maybe some blue skies. But we'll get there faster, so that's a plus. I do like to match the real world weather conditions. I think it makes it more realistic. If I'm always flying in ideal conditions, well, I don't know, I suppose you've seen that saying you see hung up on the wall sometimes. It says, smooth sailing does not make good sailors. Well, that's true in flying as well. So if you don't put yourself in situations that are a little bit more tricky or a little bit more challenging, then you're only going to be a fair weather flyer, and you're not going to know what to do when the time comes. I do really like the Cirrus Vision SF50. After the Cessna, it's my favorite plane to actually fly. I like flying the 737, but this thing, it's a little aircraft, probably the single smallest single jet engine aircraft. You know, above this would be what, a Learjet or the Citation X or something, but this thing is just a small little personal aircraft, and it's just kind of cool and fun to fly. It looks kind of sleek. It almost looks like you're driving a sports car or something like that, only, you know, has a joystick for flight control, or flight control stick instead of a yoke. Um, oh, yeah, I was 2 stages of flaps, and they're either up, halfway, or full. Yeah, I was gonna just rotate and let you see what the inside of the aircraft looks like. I can bounce around in the seats too, and um, we do have masks here. If I pull this lever, there's a parachute that will deploy. It's a whole aircraft parachute, so this thing will just fall to the earth. We'd probably still crash and burn, but um, it's supposed to make it better. Not something I want to try. In the Generation 2, as I inch closer to the back seat, it gets louder. You can actually hear the engine, but in this one I don't think it does. It just sounds like as if we were in the front of the aircraft. So I may already have a wing view set up for the right wing and the left wing. And looks like the weather's clearing up out here, so perhaps by the time we reach Monterey, we won't be in stormy weather anymore. It's 22 minutes. So when we're 10 minutes out, I'll begin my descent to 5,100 feet. Still nothing but clouds there. As you can see on the multifunction display, we are flying along the coast, and it's visible outside of the window. These look okay because we're going right beside it, but the yellow here, I might have to increase my altitude. We'll see. That's probably where I need to be at 5,100 feet by. Yeah. But with that being said, if 5,100 feet, no, Hixar's got to be up here. I don't know what this is here for. When I need to maybe start beginning my descent. Depending on how it looks, I might take it off the GPS here, fly out, towards this lake, and then reinitiate the leg or reactivate the leg and fly that direction, through there, through that valley. Yeah, north. Okay. Alright, just getting the heading bug in case I decide to use the autopilot. I can just switch to heading, and we can fly out into that valley. Here's that little dot, or that little indicator that we need to begin our descent to 5,100 feet there. Um, Let me turn off the approach and hit V and D. I don't know if it will permit me. No. Okay. Well, incidentally, I said maybe 10 minutes out I'd begin my descent to 5,100 feet when I was, had 10 minutes remaining. And I have a feeling by the time we reach 10 minutes, we're going to be at that little dot. We're very close to it. I am a little concerned about these mountains this morning. I think I'll fly north now. In just a second, so that I don't fly over that. Once I'm a little further here, I'll fly north.
Monterey Regional Information Tango. 1500 Zulu weather. Wind light and variable. Visibility 10. Sky conditions 2,400 view. 4,400
2991.
6,400 overcast. Temperature 9. Dew point 7. Altimeter 2991. Arriving runways 28 right. 28 left.
Oh, great. Good.
Departing runways 28 right. 28 left. Advise on initial contact, you have Tango.
So we've got overcast, scattered, sky conditions, 2400 view. Winds light and variable, that's not too bad. I'm not really worried about the weather part, whether or not it's overcast or not. We do get the runway that we want to land at, that's already pre-programmed. Alright, let me change to heading. And then once I'm out in that valley, I'll reactivate the leg and we'll fly from our current location in the valley at the lake to Monterey. Also, once I'm roughly equivalent with that little dot, see we're 9 minutes out now. I could, since we're heading into the valley, I could descend to 5,200 or 5,100 feet. I may go ahead and do that. So let's do vertical speed. Oh, what am I doing? I'll do 1,000 feet per minute, and we'll back down on the throttle to 70 and 1. Perhaps 65. We want to keep it at 200 knots. So it looks like we'll be in the clouds. I won't be able to see the mountains. I'm going to have to rely on the multifunction display to know that I'm not going to hit anything. Alright, now we'll set it back to nav, and we'll just follow that magenta line now that it's situated where we like it. And we won't have to worry about hitting any of those mountains for the remainder of the flight. We're at 10,000, descending to 5,100. Actually, I haven't set my altitude yet. I need to do that. There we are. Otherwise, it would have just kept descending until I hit the ground. Let's see if we can have a look. Not much to see but clouds, I'm afraid. Now our 17-mile-an-hour headwind is dead on. It's not a headwind slash crosswind by any means. We have some nearby traffic. I don't see it. Might be in the clouds. It's probably in the clouds. And we have another one heading towards us. Excuse me. $1,000 above 5,100. Looks like we're coming below the clouds a little bit. Hopefully at 5,100 we'll be below them, but I don't anticipate that we won't be below them until about 3,000 feet. So that will be sometime after Hixar. Let's see. By the time we are at Hugon, which is here, this fix here. Then we'll be below the clouds. Should be leveling off at 5,100 feet. I'll watch the throttle. Set N1 back to 80. Keep us moving at about 200 knots. Well, that has us going over 200 knots. Alright, so let me back it down 75. Fuel's still looking good. No, we haven't quite reached our initial air fix or begun anything for our approach yet, but I'm going to go ahead and turn the landing lights on so I don't have to think about doing that later. And we're in the clouds. I can't imagine, other than using up a little bit of the battery, but the generators are recharging, so it shouldn't hurt anything to have the lights on. Once we're at N1, I'll back the N1 to about 60% and watch the speed and start getting set up for my approach. Upon descent, I'll maintain a vertical speed of 300 feet per second towards the ground at 75 knots. "300 feet per minute, excuse me, not per second." I will go ahead and turn de-icing on just in case. I don't know what the temperatures are. Alright, we're turning into Hixar. N1 to 60. We should be intercepting the glide path, so I'm going to be backing the throttle way back now and start descending, or extending the flaps. Once I hear it beep, I'll put the gear down. Gear down. Flaps are at full, and I'm watching the speed now to maintain 75 knots. I do fly this aircraft in right above stall speed. All right, let's stop it there. Hold it there. It's still dropping on me a little bit, so I'm giving it just little bits of extra throttle here to keep it or maintain it at 75 knots. And we're still dropping. 64.5. All right, I'm good with that. The minimums for this are 1080. We're at 3,500 feet. But I will wait until I know or feel confident I can see the runway before I drop the autopilot. It's a little overcast, a little foggy, but I don't think there'll be any issue. This aircraft does not have, excuse me, it does not have reverse thrust or air brakes, but it does still slow down rather quickly. On the runway, (2,600 feet). I still don't see any lights or the runway. Well, I certainly don't look lined up, so maybe there'll be a little bit of a right-hand turn at the last minute, and it might be due to that hill there. No worries. That's probably why we have such a high minimum decision altitude. But it just seems odd to me to have a guidance system that guides you in at the in the wrong direction. Yeah, look at that. We'll be making a right. Let's zoom in. That's interesting to me. This is the first time I've done a landing like this where I actually had to turn. Alright, 1,700 feet for 1080. It will probably announce minimums. I'm not sure, but probably. I'm picking up a little bit speed. I'm going to pull back on the throttle just a tad. I don't want it to descend or, go below 75 knots. $1,500 feet. And now got a blind spot. I can't see the runway where I'm at. Where can I? Yes, I can. It's right there. Alright. I thought it was over here. 1,300 feet. $1,100. Disengaging autopilot. We're landing at 28 left. And according to Pappy, I'm a little low, so I'll nose it up a little bit, give it a little more power here. Everything feels good to me. I don't feel too low. I feel confident with this. The runway's at weird angles there. A little bit of an uphill. That'll make for slowing down a little easier. Throttling back, nosing up. Alright, touchdown. Flaps are coming up. Excuse me. Exit stage left. We're on a downgrade. Aircraft doesn't want to slow down. And there's a little Cessna. Let's park next to that guy. Alright, replay. Oh, brakes. You know, I don't know where the brakes are on this, incidentally. Let's do Control B. Not too shabby, but had it been even worse weather conditions than it was this morning and more foggy, you know, it would have been a little bit more of a challenge to try to make that turn at the last minute, you know, upon not being able to necessarily see the runway. Typically when you do an RNAV landing, you know, you can be way out, you know, 10, 12 miles out. You can see the PAPI lights and, you know, everything lined up good. And this one, you don't get to see it lined up good until last minute when you're, you know, just basically doing nothing but turning it in. Now, if we had approached it from the opposite direction, that would have been a different story. It would have been good to know before going into it, but I'm not familiar with this area, so I didn't know that there would be mountains or that sort of issue that I might encounter. Now, it was essentially a non-issue, you know, something we could handle at the last minute, but still, technically speaking, it was a little bit of an issue because I was not necessarily expecting that. I'm glad it happened. For me, it's just a cool experience. It's like something I can look back on and say, hey, remember that time when, I mean, it's like not a big thing, but at the same time, it's different than a lot of my other landings. Very different. I didn't have it lined up perfectly initially, but by the time the front wheel touched down, it was lined up. I just hung there for a while doing a wheelie. And you're not supposed to force the nose down. You're supposed to let it come down on its own accord. Those buildings are just floating there. That's rather interesting. I'm guessing just because it's due to the uneven territory and the rendering not knowing what to do with that. It's not every day that you get to see a car underneath a building. Well, that's not good. That car would have been damaged there in my wing. Need to work on my taxi. Perhaps when track IR comes, I'll be able to see things more clearly, better. And I didn't line up with the Cessna very well either, but that's okay. Good enough for government work. Oh, and then we just rotated that much more because of the brakes. All right, YouTube. Enjoyed the flight this morning. Y'all have a good day. Thank you for watching.